I was huddled on the bathroom floor, struggling for breath with fractured ribs, when I heard my mother say through the door, "Stay quiet. You'll mess up his future." That was the moment I understood I didn't have a family, only spectators to my suffering who chose not to acknowledge it. But my doctor did, and she didn't stay silent. Before we get into this, if you could like the video, subscribe to my channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd be really grateful. It helps more than you realize. My name is Rachel Moore. I'm 27, and I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I teach at an elementary school. I've always been the quiet one in my family, the good kid. I stayed out of trouble. I followed rules and pitched in whenever my parents needed help, which was often. I believed if I was good enough, quiet enough, and useful enough, they'd eventually love me. But none of that mattered the night my younger brother Zach lost control and I got the blame. Our family always orbited around Zach. He was the sun, and the rest of us were just tiny, forgotten moons trapped in his gravity. At 24, he was an athlete chasing a dream, with a golden arm and a temper like a storm. My parents, Deborah and Martin Moore, viewed him as their legacy. They invested all their hopes, their money, and their affection in him. Every success was applauded. Every mistake was brushed aside. I'd moved back home 6 months earlier, after my apartment lease expired. I told myself it was to save for a down payment on a home. But honestly, part of me still longed for the kind of home I'd never truly had. It was a naive hope. That house wasn't a home. It was a temple to Zach's ego and my parents' delusions. His trophies replaced my old photos on the mantle. His protein-packed meals took over the fridge, while I made do with scraps. Dad discussed his stats at dinner. Mom fussed about his workouts. I was the one who did the laundry and kept the dishes spotless. I noticed the red flags. I wasn't clueless. I noticed how Zach's moods could infect a room in seconds. I noticed the holes in his walls, explained away with a stray baseball I knew was a cover-up. I noticed his girlfriend's haunted look before she stopped showing up. I noticed everything and still said nothing. Because in my family, silence meant loyalty. To speak was to betray, and I was the loyal daughter. The night it happened was a Saturday. Zach had a major basketball game, one of his last chances before the draft scouts finalized their picks. He lost. He came home hours later, the smell of stale beer clinging to him like a cheap coat. His face was dark, his movements heavy and angry. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. I was just trying to be invisible to stay out of his warpath. "What are you looking at?" he snarled, throwing his gym bag on the floor. "Nothing, Zach. I was just cleaning up," I said, my voice small. He opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and slammed the door shut. "This whole season is a joke. The coach is an idiot." I tried to be helpful. I tried to be the good sister. "It was just one game. You'll get them next time." I even managed a small, weak smile. "It's not like it's the end of the world. That was my mistake." The joke, as small and harmless as it was the match that lit the fuse. His eyes, which were already clouded with anger, went black. "What did you say?" he whispered. It was a terrifying whisper, low and dangerous. "Nothing. I didn't get to finish." He moved faster than I could process. He grabbed the front of my shirt, his knuckles digging into my collarbone. He was so much bigger than me, so much stronger. He dragged me across the small kitchen space and slammed me hard into the edge of the granite countertop. Air left my lungs in a single painful burst. A sharp, searing pain shot through my side. I crumpled to the floor, my vision tunneling. I remember the cold tile against my cheek. I remember trying to drag air into lungs that refused to work. Then came the kick. He pulled his leg back and drove it into my side, right where I'd slammed into the counter. A sickening crack echoed in the silent room, a sound I felt deep within my bones. Then, nothing. I passed out. When I came to, everything was pain. Each breath sent a new wave of torment. I was still lying on the kitchen floor. My mother knelt beside me, but her eyes weren't on my face. They were locked on the door, ears straining for signs of my father. "Rachel," she whispered, voice sharp and urgent. "Your father's coming. You need to get up." But I couldn't move, only gasp. "I can't. I can't breathe." Her eyes finally met mine. There was no comfort in them, only fear. But not for me. For him. "Listen to me," she said, voice dropping low. "You tripped. You hit the counter. Understand? Say you tripped. You know how sensitive he is. This could wreck his draft chances. He broke me, and she was worried about his career." In agony, I crawled, inch by inch, from the kitchen to the small bathroom downstairs. I locked the door and collapsed against it, my body trembling from shock and hurt. I could hear them murmuring outside, my father's low rumble, my mother's frantic begging, and Zach. I heard him stomp upstairs and slam his bedroom door. He went to bed. That's when I heard her voice, clear, through the door's wood. "Keep quiet," my mother said, words like the final twist of a blade. "You'll ruin his future." The next morning, the pain had a life of its own. I couldn't stand upright, couldn't breathe deep. My father, Martin, looked at me with a face of stone. "No, are you okay?" "No, what happened?" Just a command, cold and unflinching. Yet in the car, "I'm taking you to urgent care." He didn't glance at me once on the way, eyes fixed ahead. "You fell down the stairs," he said. It wasn't a question. It was instruction. "That's what you'll say. Your mother's a wreck." Zach's out of his mind with worry. "We don't need more drama. Promise me, Rachel." I was so worn down, so conditioned to obey, that I just nodded. No tears. Just a silent nod. What was one more lie? At the clinic, the flickering fluorescent lights pounded in my skull. A nurse checked my vitals and asked what happened. I repeated my line. I fell down the stairs. The words felt like venom. Then the doctor walked in, calm, kind, steady. Her name tag read, Dr. Melissa Trent. She looked at my chart, then at me. She gently pressed on my side, and I couldn't hold back the cry of pain that escaped my lips. "I need to get an X-ray," she said softly. "But first, I want you to be honest with me. That pattern of bruising here, it doesn't look like a fall. She leaned in a little closer, her voice lowering. Rachel, did someone do this to you? I froze. My father was in the waiting room, probably tapping his foot impatiently, expecting me to come out with a prescription for painkillers and a story he could control. All my life, my family looked at me, but never really saw me. They saw a quiet daughter, a convenient helper, a potential problem to be managed. But this woman, this stranger, looked at me with true concern. She saw my pain. Tears I didn't know I had began to well in my eyes. The dam I had built inside me started to crack. I can't, I stammered, thinking of my father's anger, my mother's pleading, Zach's future. Dr. Trent didn't push. She just nodded. Okay, after the x-rays. She came back into the room and closed the door. She placed the films on the light box. I could see the dark, jagged lines on the image. You have 2 broken ribs and 1 that's fractured, she said, her tone professional, but gentle. This kind of injury requires significant amount of force, a direct impact. She quietly took photos of my bruised side with a clinical camera. Then she turned back to me, her gaze steady. I'm going to ask you one more time, Rachel. I'm a mandated reporter. That means if I believe crime has been committed, especially one of abuse, I am legally required to report it. Did someone do this to you? The whole world seemed to stop. It was me against them. A lifetime of being silent versus this one chance to be heard. I looked at the x-ray of my own broken bones, the proof of what he did. I looked at this doctor who was willing to stand up for me when my own parents wouldn't. In a voice, barely above a whisper, I told the truth. My brother. The words hung in the air, small but heavy. I immediately started crying, begging her not to do anything. Please don't. You don't understand. It will tear my family apart. It will ruin his life. His life, Dr. Trent said, her voice firm but not unkind. Rachel, he broke your ribs. What about your life? I cannot, and I will not let this go. My responsibility is to you, my patient. And just like that, the choice was no longer mine. She made the call. She notified Child Protective Services because I was living in the home where the abuse occurred, and they in turn notified law enforcement. By the time my father drove me home, the world had changed. A police car was parked in our driveway. Zach was taken in for questioning. The moment I stepped inside, the betrayal from my family was immediate and complete. My mother glared at me with sheer hatred. What did you do? She screamed. My father seized my arm, his grip bruising. I told you to keep your mouth shut, he growled, his face close to mine. You just ruined your brother's future. I hope you're proud. But I had stopped listening. The haze of fear and duty was finally beginning to clear. While they yelled, while they poured all their energy into shielding their violent son, I moved past them. I went to my room, took out the suitcase I had never truly unpacked, and began placing my clothes in it. I had no plan. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't remain there another moment. My bags were already packed. The first few weeks were a haze. Dr. Trent was my lifeline. She gave me the contact for a local women's shelter network. Though the main building was full, they helped me find a small subsidized apartment across town. It was cramped and bare, but it was safe. It was mine. The first thing I did was file a restraining order against Zach. Standing in the courthouse, hands trembling as I filled out the forms, was the hardest and most freeing thing I'd ever done. My family didn't let up. The calls and texts were endless. My mother left weepy voicemails, accusing me of tearing the family apart. My father sent messages threatening to cut me off completely, like he hadn't already done so years ago. They tried every tactic: guilt, shame, intimidation, even fake apologies from Zach that they had likely written themselves. I blocked all of them, every number. Dr. Trent introduced me to a pro bono lawyer named Sarah, a fierce advocate who specialized in domestic abuse cases. Sarah helped me sue Zach, not just for my hospital bills, but also for emotional trauma. The legal action and police report reached his basketball league. His contract was suspended indefinitely while the investigation proceeded. The golden path he walked was now drenched in the mud he had splattered himself. I began therapy. I talked about everything. The fractured ribs, of course, but also the lifelong series of invisible wounds. The constant feeling of being less important. The deep aching void left by the emotional neglect from those meant to love me unconditionally. Bit by bit, I began to heal. I hung pictures in my little apartment. I bought a tiny plant. I started sleeping through the night without jolting awake in fear. Months later, I came across a listing for a community grant. It was aimed at new programs to support at-risk youth. An idea flickered to life inside me, born from pain. I spent weeks crafting a proposal for an after-school program designed for girls from abusive or neglectful homes. A safe haven where they could be seen, where they'd learn their voices mattered. I got the grant. I named it The Quiet Should Speak. The final blow landed nearly a year after the attack. The program was thriving. We held a modest community fundraiser at a local library. I stood at the podium, speaking about our mission, when the auditorium's back doors suddenly slammed open. It was Zach. He looked worn down. No new contract. The lawsuit had taken its toll. He was leaner, but the fury in his eyes was unchanged. "You," he shouted, fingers stabbing the air in my direction. The room went still. "You did this. You destroyed my life. Over a stupid fall." My chest pounded. Against the same ribs he had once shattered. The old Rachel would have cowered. She would have disappeared. She would have wished for the ground to swallow her whole. But I wasn't her anymore. Calmly, I set my note cards on the podium. I stepped off the stage and walked slowly into the aisle, making sure every eye could see me. I stood still in the hush of the auditorium and met his gaze. Then I turned toward the audience, parents, supporters, young girls in my program. My voice was firm. It didn't waver. "This," I said, eyes scanning the frozen faces, "is the man who broke my ribs." I let the silence carry it. And then came the truth. This is the family who told me to stay silent. The hush was thunderous. Total. More cutting than any scream, more final than any sentence. In that stillness, everyone knew. Security moved in, calm but firm, and let a flustered, broken Zach out. I never returned to my family. I never waited for a sorry. I didn't need one. Zach's downfall wasn't my doing. He caused it himself. My parents didn't lose a daughter. They cast one aside. Peace came not from revenge, but from truth. I didn't need their regret to feel whole. I had my voice, my mission, my new life. And for once, that was truly enough. If anyone has ever told you to be silent after being hurt, if you've ever been diminished so someone else could feel powerful, this is your sign. Don't. You have the right to be seen, to be safe, to be heard. And if this story spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let's ensure no one ever feels forced to suffer alone again. Your voice matters.